on any of that. There we go.
Great. I'm going to share my screen here. You can see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Excellent. So a couple of just quick housekeeping notes, folks, as we go forward here. I'm going to introduce the topic in a minute. But in terms of housekeeping, we're going to go the full 90 minutes today, maybe longer. I'm going to try to keep my workshop delivery component down to about 60 minutes. So we'll try to wrap that up by 2:30 Eastern. And Miriam will rely on you to help us keep track of time. Mm-hmm. And then we'll save a good 30 minutes at the end for Q&A and discussion. As I mentioned earlier, I'm very keen to hear your questions about today's material and make sure those questions get answered. And I'm happy to take a little bit of extra time after 3 o'clock Eastern. If we have more questions that need to be addressed, that can take a little bit of time and we can make sure that we address those. But we're going to focus the first kind of phase of this presentation on the presentation. And so as we go, you'll see comments in the chat are always welcome, but you'll also see a Q&A box on Zoom at the top of your screen. And so if you have a question about the content that we're going to be delivering here, go ahead and drop that into the Q&A box, and then we're going to circle back at the end and we're going to go through those one at a time. Sound good? Excellent. So let's jump in. The topic of today's workshop, as we mentioned earlier, is rich consultant, poor consultant. Who knows what that's a nod to? It's fairly obvious, but what's that a nod to? What's that a reference to? Everybody know rich consultant, poor consultant?
Am I allowed to answer these, or I'm just...
No, you're not allowed to answer
not.
these.
Yeah.
No, you know the answers. It's a nod to a very, very popular, critically acclaimed book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Or if you haven't read the book, the long and short of it is the author tells a story of his two dads, and they weren't his real dads. One of them was his real dad, the poor dad, and the other was his non-biological father, who was a father figure to him. And these two father figures of his had very different worldviews around money and wealth, and different mindsets around money and wealth. So he chronicles how they thought differently about money and wealth, and how one ended up becoming rich and prosperous and wealthy, and the other one maintained poor / middle class / struggling with money. And it's one of the reasons for that book's popularity was this narrative-based articulation of two very different realities. You know, Robert Kiyosaki could have just said, well, here's what it takes to get rich, and here's what happens when you think a certain way, you'll become poor. Like, he could have said that, right? But what was engaging about it was how he told the story and taught the lessons via narrative, via the articulation of these two characters, rich dad and poor dad. So I'm going to attempt to do the same thing here. So this is going to be a little bit different from any other workshop you've attended of mine in the past, and maybe any workshop you've attended at all in the past. And that I'm really going to tell you a story. This is more story time with Ahmed than it's than it's anything else. I'm going to tell you the story of the rich consultant and the poor consultant. I'm going to tell you the tale of two consultants. And through that narrative, we're going to learn some really valuable lessons. Now, the reason I'm so excited to share this with you is because you may or may not know this, but I don't know many other folks in the business who have coached and mentored more B2B consultants than we have. I just don't. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying I don't know who they are. And if I don't know who they are, they probably don't exist. And we've basically noticed certain patterns. We've noticed that the ones who succeed, the rich consultants, so to speak, they do certain things and they think a certain way, and they have certain behaviors and strategies that they employ. Whereas the folks who struggle do things very differently. And the patterns have become painstakingly clear to us. And this is really, I think, the first time that we're going to articulate those patterns to you and draw out that distinction between the rich consultant and the poor consultant. The distinctions are going to seem deceptively simple. Okay, deceptively simple. In that you might look at some of these and be like, oh, well, that's obvious, and that makes sense. And while it may seem obvious, the key to success is implementing simple ideas consistently. So these are ideas that are simple in theory, challenging in application. But the first step is that we need to understand what they are in theory so that we can apply them to your particular context. And that's where I'm eager and keen to have a conversation with you to answer your questions. So one more thing I want to clarify, and then just a housekeeping note before we jump in, is when we talk about rich and poor, okay, that's meant to be somewhat jarring, right? That's why Robert Kiyosaki sold a lot of books. But we don't necessarily mean rich strictly in the financial sense and poor strictly in the financial sense. A rich consultant is one who, yeah, definitely makes more money and earns more income and charges more, but also one who has more control over their business. And also one who has more options, and also one who doesn't feel that they have to work with a particular client or engage in a particular relationship if it doesn't suit them anymore. A rich consultant calls their own shots. They pave their own way. They don't do things because they need the money or because the client's going to get upset or because they need the deal. They don't need anything. That's what makes them rich. Whereas a poor consultant is the polar opposite. Definitely earns less money, definitely charges lower fees, but also has no options. Also is reliant on a small network of people and reliant on a client or two and reliant upon the clients that they have and can't walk away from the relationship because they need the business and they need the money. And the two are worlds apart, not just financially. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to clarify. And finally, I've got a special offer for you folks at the end. So at the end, meaning at the 60-minute mark, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, I do have a special offer for you that you're going to want to stay till the end to be able to get and take advantage of. The offer is going to expire an hour after today's workshop. And I won't spoil it because that would defeat the purpose, but I will tell you this, there's nothing to buy. So it's not like an offer for you to buy something. You can put your credit card away. It is a bonus set and package of trainings that we want to give you as pretty much a thank you for attending this workshop completely free of charge. And I'll speak to that more at the end and we'll show you how to redeem that offer, but we're very excited to get that training into your hands. A lot of it is going to operationalize and give you really tangible, practical next steps to take to put what you're going to learn on this workshop into practice. Cool. Last thing I'll say, and we'll jump in. My objective here is very simple. I'm not going to give you a tactic and I'm not going to give you a strategy. I'm not going to give you some like very superficial idea and, have you go and run with it. My objective here is to get you to think differently about your consulting business. That's my objective. My objective is to challenge your preconceived notions about what it takes to run a successful consulting business. My objective is to challenge some of your assertions. My objective is to challenge the way that you're thinking. My objective is to challenge what you believe to be true in the past. Because if you are not where you want to be, okay, and it's probably why you're here. If you're not where you want to be, then we're going to have to disrupt the way that you think about your business, because the way that you think about your business directly leads into the actions that you take, which affect the results that you get. And my job here, my goal here is to disrupt the way that you think about your business so that your action changes and your results change. That's what I'm trying to do. Make sense? Everybody here with me, give me a yay in the chat. If you're with me, you're following, you're ready to go, you're eager. Give me a yay in the chat. Let's read the crowd. Miriam, how are they?
Okay, got a lot of yeses. Okay, getting some emojis. Yeah. Okay, wow. I think this is one of the biggest workshops we've had. So like the comments are going way faster than I can read them.
We said we'd cap at 100 and there's 97 people here. That's pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
All right, folks, let's jump in. So I want to introduce you to Julie and John. Here's the story. Julie and John both worked at a very large global consulting firm called Consult Co. And they both left that firm at about the same time, 5 years ago. And they both left the firm to start an independent consulting practice. 5 years later, Julie and John end up meeting at a networking event. And they bump into each other and they get to talking. And Julie says, John, it's been years. We left the firm at about the same time. We haven't seen each other since. How's business? And John, trying to muster up as much enthusiasm as possible, says, oh, it's been great. But behind his words, Julie could tell that he didn't really mean it. So it's been great. Yeah, it's been really good. What about you? Quickly changing the subject. And then Julie's sensing John's struggle in his tone, and she starts to kind of downplay her success, because actually the truth is things have gone really, really well for Julie, and she couldn't have been happier about leaving ConsultCo, and she couldn't have been happier about the results she's gotten over the past 5 years. But she can kind of tell now's not the time to gloat. So she kind of downplays her success and says, "Well, things are pretty good. Yeah, working with some great clients, doing some interesting work, and you know what? No complaints." And John now, sensing Julie's confidence and sensing that she's actually downplaying her success, because he's actually heard through the grapevine, they maintain a very similar network, that her firm's growing like gangbusters, and that she's actually looking for good people to join her team. So he knows she's doing well, and he knows that she's kind of glossing over some of that success. And deep down, he really wants to know, what did she do? We left the firm at the same time. We were at the same level. We were regarded very similarly. Julie wasn't, like a top performer, and John wasn't bottom of the barrel at ConsultCo. They were regarded in a very similar light. And so he's, low key trying to figure out and trying to read from her what's made the difference and how are her results so different from his. So he asked her, like, "Oh, are you here networking, looking for new clients as well?" And she says, "Well, actually, no, we're pretty much at capacity right now. I'm more interested in looking for good people to join our team so that we can serve a wait list of clients that we have who are looking to work with us." And John says, "Wait list?" And he's trying his best to contain his shock, because while he's here trying to find somebody who will pay him and sign a contract, Julie here has a wait list of clients that she can't even work with because she has capacity constraints. And he goes, "Well, that must be nice." And then John starts to level with Julie, and he goes, "Listen, I'll level with you," because he realizes at this point, saving face is probably not going to be in his best interest. He might as well get as much value out of this conversation as he can, given that she's clearly on top and he's not. So he goes, "I'll level with you. Things haven't exactly gone according to plan. I got some clients after leaving the firm through my network, but once those initial projects dried up, it's been a struggle to consistently fill the pipeline and bring in new deals. And not for lack of trying. I've been attending networking events. I've been putting myself out there. I've been working my network and my relationships, but no one seems to be hiring consultants these days. Maybe it's the market, maybe it's COVID. I don't really know what's going on, but no one seems to be buying." And Julie, at this point, she can sense the desperation in John's voice. So Julie now kind of switches into teacher mode. She sees this as an opportunity to help a fellow peer, fellow colleague, a former colleague, and she can sense that he's looking for help. So like a good consultant, she starts to ask questions. And Julie starts with, "Well, tell me more about your business. Who's your target market?" And John says, "Well, it's CEOs and C-suite executives, the kind of folks that we used to work with at ConsultCo. And I like to keep things pretty broad because I like the variety that different organizations and industries bring to the table." And Julie says, "Well, that just might be your first problem, John, because it sounds like you don't really have a target market. And the old expression that if you don't know what you're looking for, you're not likely to find it." And John says, "Well, I've heard that before, Julie, but it worked for ConsultCo, didn't it? They were very broad in their targeting. Their market was broad. They weren't very narrow in their focus, but we never seemed to have any trouble bringing in new deals at that firm." And Julie interjects and says, "Yeah, but ConsultCo was already a major global brand with far-reaching relationships, and their reputation allowed them to go broad and still bring in deals. But without a reputation like theirs, how would a small shop like yours or mine compete?" And John says, "Okay, well, how do you decide about choosing a market? How do you make that decision?" And that's when Julie pulls out a pen and a cocktail napkin, and she shows John the following model. So Julie writes at the top of the cocktail napkin, 3D client clarity. And she says, "It's a very simple concept and a very simple framework that you can use to choose your market. But the key is making a decision and sticking to it." Again, simple in theory, but making the decision and sticking to it consistently is where the magic is here. So Julie says, I use a framework called 3D client clarity, and that helps me get laser focused on the clients that I want to pursue, which allows me to craft a message that specifically resonates with those clients. And she draws this out. And she says the first thing is you've got to identify the right clients. Okay, you've got to identify the right client. If my pencil would work, that would be extremely helpful. All right, time to panic, Miriam. My pencil's not working.
Uh-oh.
Give me a second.
Sure. I feel like we should have elevator music for technical difficulties like this.
I feel like
Funny thing is, before this one, we were super organized. Like we actually for
no,
once.
I got it. Sorry, it's me. I was on the eraser. So the eraser's not going to write. You know, there you go. Happens to the best of us, right, David? Or people like me, either way. So where were we? So Julie says, the first thing you've got to identify, John, is who is the right client. Okay. That is demographically, who are they? What kind of company? What industry? What size? The obvious demographic information that you might think about, right? And if you're too broad, then it's A, it's hard to find them. And B, it's pretty much impossible to craft a message that's going to get their attention, because if you try to speak to everybody, you're effectively speaking to nobody. But that's not good enough. It's not good enough to just have a target market in the traditional sense, to have identified the demographic considerations that make up who your market is. You've got to also target the right problem. Okay. And finally, you got to identify the right timing. So Julie says, look, your ideal client is actually at the intersection of all three. It's the right client with the right problem at the right time. And she says a lot of folks make the mistake of just choosing a vertical, having an ideal client persona that's very demographically based. It's this type of client and this type of industry of this size. But the problem with that is within a vertical or within a demographic profile of a client, you're going to have clients that have all kinds of problems. And if you try to position yourself as an expert in all of those areas, it's just not believable, which is why just having a target client or a demographic profile of a client is an important first step, but not sufficient in and of itself. And John interjects and says, well, why isn't it believable that I could be an expert in all the problems that a client faces? Because again, ConsultCo did it. ConsultCo didn't limit themselves to just one problem. They didn't just say, we only solve this problem and we don't do anything else. They solved a host of problems. In fact, that was their entire strategy. When they went into a client organization, which was very broad in their case, they would solve all kinds of problems, one after another. That was their strategy. They'd go in and they would diversify all the problems that they could solve and bring in new business. So if they can do it, why can't I do it? And Julie says, yes, but ConsultCo had legions of consultants at their disposal, including yourself and myself, with varying expertise. So they could make that claim. They could claim to be the one-stop shop that could solve all of the client's problems and make that believable because they have what, hundreds, thousands of consultants at their disposal? So that's believable. And the clients know that the best of the best, they go to work with ConsultCo and ConsultCo's competitors. But how many consultants do you have, John? And that felt like a bit of a low blow. Because Julie knows it's just John, and John says, well, it's just me right now. And Julie says, exactly. And do you really think a client's going to believe that you can be world-class at solving every problem that they've got? I mean, put yourself in their shoes. Would you believe that of a consultant? And John says, well, I guess not. And Julie says, well, that's why just identifying the right client is an important first step, but it's not enough. You've also got to choose the right problem. And John says, well, how do I choose a single problem? I mean, every client has a long list, and I'm frankly interested in solving a number of different problems. And Julie says, you're right, but not all of their problems are worth your time, right? You've got to choose the problem that you are truly world-class at solving, the one where you can position yourself as a foremost expert and compete with just about anybody. And the truth is, if you really check yourself on which client problems you are world-class at, which ones you are the best at solving, most adept at solving, most proficient at solving, most effective at solving, they're not all the same. You're better in some areas than others. Is that fair? John says that's fair. And the last is timing. And Julie says, you know how there's some clients who are ripe to work with you, like it's now, they need it now, and they close really, really fast, and there's not a lot of fuss. And there's some who are just not ready yet. And John says, yeah, well, I talked to plenty of prospects who aren't ready. That's for sure. And Julie says, that's why this is part of the model. It's not enough to know who the right client is, and it's not enough to choose the right problem to solve. You've also got to identify the specific timing that it makes sense for a client to work with you. That's going to tell you who to go after and tell the client when it makes sense to engage, so you don't waste your time in endless dead-end conversations with prospects who just aren't ready to buy yet. And now this is getting too theoretical for John and probably you, right? And John says, well, I need an example. And Julie says, well, here's mine. My right client is a VC-backed B2B SaaS company. Guess how many people target them? Everybody. Lots of consultants targeting VC-backed B2B SaaS companies. That's a big market. And I can't possibly be the only consultant for such a broad market. So I have to add in a problem. So we solve a very specific problem for them, one that very few others can compete with us on, and that is client experience and retention. In other words, we help them reduce churn and maximize lifetime value of their clients. That's all we do. We don't do anything else. And even that, it's hard for a client to know when to engage us on the back of that alone, because lots of clients have client experience problems and retention problems. But how do they know that we can help them? How do they know that we are in a position to help them and they're in a position to be helped by us? Well, that's by clarifying the timing. So for us, it's once they cross $5 million in annual recurring revenue. That's when we know that they have enough of a client base that we can easily make tweaks and adjustments to their client experience that will drive higher retention, higher lifetime value, and the business case for working with us becomes a no-brainer. We know if they're at $5 million ARR, annual recurring revenue, that we can easily go in, build a business case. We know the opportunity is there, and they will get a 10x ROI on their investment with us. And we don't talk to anybody who doesn't meet these criteria. And then Julie says to John, do you see how different this is from selling quote unquote management consulting? And John says, yeah. And at this point, he's a little bit uncomfortable comparing his track record over the last 5 years to Julie's, and he seeks to change the subject and move on to the next question, which is, John says, look, I can understand now how you're able to sell with a track record like yours. I mean, you've done now, by the look of it, a number of different engagements within a particular focus in the B2B SaaS market, solving for client experience. So I get how you're able to sell with that track record. I get that you're using your case studies to sell. But how'd you get your first few deals before you had all those case studies? And how would someone like me, without that very focused track record like you have, how would I compete and be able to win deals? And Julie says, well, let me ask you this. When you're talking to a client who needs your help and they ask you the question, and they don't always use these words, but they ask you some version of the question, well, why should we work with you? What do you say? And John is visibly uncomfortable by the question. And he starts rambling on with things like, well, I tell them I spent 10 years at Consultco, one of the most well-known global management consulting firms in the world. And I did really well there, and I got promoted, and I went to a really high level, and I work with all these clients there, and I have all these credentials and certifications that demonstrate and add credibility to my expertise, and I'm very customer service oriented, and very client oriented, and very dependable, and you can depend on it. And he goes on and on and on and on. And Julie goes, "Does that work?" And John says, "Well, not as well as I'd like it to." And Julie says, "John, clients don't care about your experience or your credentials or your expertise. That's not what they're buying." And John's confused. That goes against everything that he's been taught, everything he's believed up until now. And he goes, "What are they buying then?" And Julie says, "Well, John, in a word, it's confidence." And now John's getting frustrated. Confidence? What do you mean confidence? I mean, how are they buying confidence? I mean, these are serious executives, business leaders, department heads. I mean, they don't make decisions on some, kind of airy-fairy notion of confidence. These are serious people, serious buyers. And then Julie says, "Well, look, John, let me ask you a question. Let's say you had to choose between, or let's say a client rather had to choose between two consultants. And let's say that they have 90% confidence in one consultant's ability to deliver on their promise. 90% confidence in one consultant's ability to deliver results, and about a 50% confidence rate in the other consultant. Who do you think they would choose?" And John says, "Well, I guess the 90% guy." And Julie says, "Exactly." Now, clients don't always know that confidence is what they're looking for, but at the end of the day, they don't want a consultant, they want results, right? No client wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, I wish I could hire a consultant." And no client goes to bed at night saying, "I hope I find a consultant tomorrow." They don't want a consultant, they want results. So what they're looking for is they're looking for the consultant who they can have the highest degree of confidence in will be able to deliver them results. And there are 3 secret cues that clients are looking for that tell them you're going to get them results. And John says, "What are the 3 secret cues?" And Julie pulls out another cocktail napkin and her trusty pen. And Julie says, "I call this the confidence builder." 3 cues clients are looking for to be able to have confidence that you can deliver the results that you promise, and therefore they should hire you. And they don't always know they're looking for these cues. It's not always explicit, but deep down, this is what they're looking for. Cue number 1 is problem education. Problem education. So Julie says, "John, there's a very large study of professional services transactions conducted by a company called the Rain Group. And what they did was they surveyed the buyers of over 600 professional services and consulting transactions. And what they wanted to know was that from the buyer's perspective, from the decision maker's perspective, what made them choose the winners of these transactions over the losers. And this is an interesting study because it's one of the very few studies where the buyers were surveyed. There's a lot of studies in sales about where the sellers were surveyed, and the seller's perspective is obviously biased. But in this study, the buyer was surveyed and asked, what made you choose the winners of these transactions, the consulting firms that you chose to work with and chose to partner with? What made you choose them over others? And they asked the buyers to rank the winners versus the losers across 43 different factors. And the number one factor that separated the winners of these transactions from the losers was also the 43rd factor for the losers, i.e., it was the one thing that the winners did the best, and it was the one thing that the losers did the worst, the highest delta, 1 to 43. Do you know what it was, John? Now John's paying attention. And she goes, it was, in the buyer's words, they said that the seller educated me with new ideas and perspectives. the seller educated me with new ideas and perspectives. It wasn't, John, that they attended the same networking event as me, or they're my cousin's brother's dog's father, or that we played golf together, or we go to the same country club, or they're in my local neighborhood. It was none of those things. It wasn't that we had a strong relationship and we get along and we go for beers together. It wasn't any of those things. The number one factor was that, in the buyer's words, the seller educated me with new ideas and perspectives. And that just makes sense, John, doesn't it? Because when it comes to confidence, if a consultant comes along and they educate you with new ideas and perspectives, they help you see the problem that they're facing from a different light. They help you see mistakes you were making in the past. They help you see how some of the potential solutions you've been considering are not aligned with your objectives. And they're educating you on the problem that you're facing and showing you viable alternatives to solving that problem that you couldn't see before. What does that get you? It gets you confidence. All things considered, if one consultant comes in and educates me on my problem before they try to prescribe a solution, and another one comes along and just jumps into a prescription, into a solution, and says, here's what we can do for you, who am I going to trust? Who do I have more confidence in? It's the one who educates me. And that's the first cue that clients are looking for. The second is solution prescription. And these go hand in hand, because once you've educated me on the problem, you've shown me a different lens, worldview, framework through which to see the problem. Now you're in a position to prescribe a solution that fits like a glove. There's two ways to sell consulting services, Julie says to John. You can sell a suit off the rack, or you can sell a bespoke suit. And most consultants sell the suit off the rack. They go into the meeting with the client and they have some fancy pitch deck and some fancy slides designed with some overly complicated frameworks designed to make them look smart, right? And very complicated graphics and highly intellectualized ideas in an attempt to make them look smarter than the client. And in the hope the client will say, well, clearly they're smarter than us because they use words that we don't know, so we should hire them. And that's an off the rack solution. That's like buying a suit off the rack and hoping that it fits, but not really knowing until you try it on. But by then you've left the store and there's no return policy. Clients aren't going to have that much confidence in a solution like that. But if you're prescribing and tailoring your solution to the client's needs because you've sufficiently understood the problem that they're facing and you've educated them on the problem, and you're tailoring your solution to them like a tailor would tailor a bespoke suit, what does that get them? Confidence. And again, if a consultant walks in and offers your client a solution that feels like it's off the rack, it's generic, it's not tailored to them, it's what they'd sell to anybody. And then another one comes in and it's bespoke, it's tailored, it fits them like a glove. It's directly addressing their very specific needs. Who do they have more confidence in getting them results? The answer is obvious. And the third cue is track record. And Julie says, you're right, John. Right now, our track record is our biggest asset. Because in the last 5 years, I have at least 10 case studies of B2B SaaS businesses that are VC backed that we have made measurable impact on their client experience with, who have gotten more than a 10x investment on their work with us. And it's proven out and it's verified and it's demonstrable. And so we don't need to try that hard anymore because our reputation precedes us. And you can get there by focusing, by narrowing your focus, by only choosing to work with the clients and solving the problems that you are going to be world-class at solving. But until you get there, you're relying on really thorough and in-depth problem education that builds trust and very tailored and bespoke solutions that give clients confidence that you're going to be able to deliver the goods. And then when you do, you add your track record. But Julie says, note client clarity, John. Having a track record that's a dog's breakfast of projects isn't going to do you any good. If a client says, show me your case studies, and every client is from a different industry, and every problem is a different problem, and the client can't see themselves in any of your case studies, what's the point of it? A track record has to be relevant to be meaningful, Julie says. If your track record or your case studies are simply proof that you've done work before, that's a very low bar, John. We don't care that you've done work before. We assume you've done work before. We want to know, what work have you done that's relevant to us and is going to give us confidence that you can deliver us results. And John moves on to the next question. My mouse is acting up. Did that switch over properly, Miriam?
Yeah, we're looking at the slide deck right now.
Great. Got it. So John says, look, I get that, Julie. That makes a lot of sense. But honestly, I wish I could say that any of this was my real problem. Because honestly, even getting conversations with decision makers is a bit of a challenge. I mean, I get referrals every now and then from clients, but those are few and far between and not nearly enough to sustain the business. And, I can see how I could implement a lot of what you're teaching me here in terms of the confidence building and client clarity, but I can't even get in the room. And Julie says, well, John, what's your marketing strategy? And John says, what do you mean? And Julie says, I shouldn't be laughing at my own lines, right? Is that poor form, Miriam? Sorry. Let me have some fun here, folks. All right. Obviously, I wanted to be a novelist at one point. And this is me living up that dream, right? So Julie says, well, what are you doing to open up new relationships with potential clients? And John says, well, I go to events like this. I go for coffee with my network. I ask for introductions. I mean, I don't know, Julie. I'm not a marketer. I'm a consultant. And Julie says, that's the problem, John. You're not a marketer. You're a consultant, but you need to be a marketer. Otherwise, you're completely reliant upon deals magically falling in your lap. And in my experience, that doesn't happen as often as you'd like it to be. And John says, I don't know. Marketing sounds so complicated. There's so many platforms, there's so many tools, there's so many strategies, there's so many perspectives, so many opinions. It's all very overwhelming. And Julie says, well, it doesn't have to be. Yes, there are a lot of tools and tactics and platforms, but if you boil it down, you really only need 3 mechanisms in place for your marketing to work and to generate a consistent flow of opportunities for your firm. And that's when Julie pulls out another napkin. We're on cocktail napkin number 3, if you're keeping track. And she says, look, John, when you really boil it down, yes, marketing can seem complicated, but when you really boil it down, it's only 3 things that have to happen for a client to work with you. There's 3 distinct stages that a client has to go through to work with you. Number 1 is they must know who you are. Kind of obvious, right? If they don't know who you are, can't work with you. Number 2 is they must believe that you have the solution to their problems. Bonus points if anybody can read my writing. We're doing an internal client training, and I was writing out on my iPad. And I was recording with Carrie, who's our director of client success. And I said, Carrie, you're going to use my notes here? And she said, I would if anybody could read them. Fair enough. Need to work on my legibility. And Julie says, and the third thing is they've got to be able to build a business case to work with you. Makes sense, right? 3 simple things that have to be true. Steps for a client to go through. They got to know who you are. They've got to believe you have the solution to their problem. And they've got to be able to business case to be able to justify committing the resources and the funds to working with you. Not terribly complicated. And all you need, John, is you need 3 mechanisms to deliver on these 3 objectives. And Julie says, I call this the AEC method. So in terms of getting them to know who you are, what you need is an awareness mechanism. And Julie says, for most consultants, this is the first bottleneck. It's awareness. And Julie says, look, John, if you're limiting yourself to the direct network of people who already know, like, and trust you, then, well, you're limiting yourself. And you have a decent network, but it's finite. And let's say, for argument's sake, your network is 100 strong. Let's just run with that number for argument's sake. Julie says, let's say that your network is 100 strong, i.e. there's 100 people in your network who know, like, and trust you. And is it safe for me to say, John, that all the business that you've generated to date has come from this limited network of folks who already know, like, and trust you? They have direct experience working with you. They're former clients, former colleagues. Safe to say that all your business has come from that network? And John says, yeah, that's precisely where it's come from. There's nowhere else that it would come from. And she goes, okay, well, let's say that that's 100 people. Well, now the question becomes, is there more opportunity in your network? Yeah, probably. There probably is more opportunity within this network of 100 people that you're not currently tapping into or aware of. Probably. Plausibly. But after a while, it starts to feel a bit like squeezing water from a stone. She says, in the beginning, John, when you went out to your network, it was fairly easy to get deals, wasn't it? Sounds like you had some success in the early days. And John said, yeah, absolutely. And then those deals dried up, right? And he goes, yeah. So that's a telltale sign. You've squeezed as much as you're going to get out of that network. Are there a few deals here and there? Probably. But is it worth your time and energy now to go and squeeze more water out of a stone? Or should you focus your attention and energy on growing the network and expanding your network to other folks who have the problem that you solve that you don't yet know? And Julie wraps this up by saying, look, right now it's 100. What if your network was 200? What if that circle of people who know, like, and trust you doubled? And what if it was 300? And what if it was 1,000? What would that do to your business? And John says, well, it would blow up. It would explode. It would probably be too much opportunity. And Julie says, exactly. And that's where right now your bottleneck is. And that's the bottleneck that most consultants face, is they just don't have enough of a network. They don't have enough awareness and visibility into their target market. And if they could double, triple, 5x, 10x their awareness, their business would follow suit. But that's just the first mechanism. Probably going to change the game for you, John, but it's only the first. The second is an engagement mechanism. So if we accept the premise that the prospect must believe that you have the solution to their problem, not only to work with you, which is an easy premise to accept, but even to have a conversation with you. And John says, what do you mean? And Julie said, look, John, there's a study that Google and the corporate executive board conducted of B2B transactions, B2B marketing transactions. And what they found was that the average B2B buyer is 57% through their decision-making process before they ever contact a vendor. And John says, so what does that mean? And Julie says, well, think about it. If the average buyer is 57% through their decision-making process before they contact a vendor, that means they've more than half made up their minds before they're even willing to have a conversation with you or entertain a conversation with you. In other words, John, clients don't talk to strangers. We learned that as kids, right? Stranger danger. Well, your clients remember that. And they don't talk to strangers. So unless they have reason to believe that you have the solution to their problems, not only are you not going to win the deal, you're not going to get the conversation. You're not even on the list. You're invisible to them. And that's why you need an engagement mechanism that delivers and instills belief in the mind of the prospect that you have the solution to their problems. That's what gets you the conversation. And ultimately, that's what wins you the deal. And finally, you have to have a conversion mechanism. So how do you help the prospect build that business case? How do you help them make that case and allocate and dedicate the resources to working with you? And that's a conversion mechanism. And in the interest of time, we're going to keep going here and move on to the next distinction. Did that switch over, Miriam?
Mhm.
Yeah, you can see the slides.
Yep, we're on the slides.
Great. So John says, okay, I mean, I get it. Clearly, I'm not doing marketing and I should be doing marketing. But, one thing I worry about, Julie, is, even when I win deals, like even when things go well and I end up winning the deal, my pricing is completely out of whack. We were billing, Julie, we were billing out at $300, $400, $500 per hour at ConsultCo. But I got to fight like hell to command fees like that now. So how do you, when you win the deal, when you get the conversation, how do you command a premium rate? How do you make sure that your engagements are profitable? And Julie says, well, John, it's simple. We don't bill for time. John says, what do you mean? And Julie says, well, look, John, unless you're ConsultCo, you're a big global consulting firm, it's pretty hard to justify a high hourly rate like that. Clients just don't have the stomach for it. And there's an upper limit to what you can charge on an hourly basis, but there's no upper limit to what you can charge for value. And John sees where this is going. So he cuts her off and he goes, listen, I'd love to switch to value pricing. I heard all about it, read the book, but it seems complicated. And I don't know how to have that conversation. I just default to an hourly rate because that's what they expect. That's what I'm used to. That's what we did at ConsultCo. I wouldn't even know where to begin having a value pricing conversation. And Julie says, well, John, before you can charge for value, you need a mechanism that clearly articulates to the client how value is created or how they're going to get results. John says, what do you mean? Well, think about it. A client's only going to pay for value if they can visualize value creation. They're not going to pay for value on the promise of value. They're not going to pay for value because you say to them, believe me, there's going to be value. That's not going to work, right? They've got to see how value is going to be created. They've got to see how results are going to be attained. And when they see it and believe it, that's when they're willing to then cut a check that's value priced and that's premium, because they fundamentally believe that going through that particular process with you is going to lead to a transformation and to value creation. And John says, well, how do I do that, Julie? And then Julie pulls out another trusty napkin. She says, let me show you. And Julie says, look, John, the key to value pricing is it's not the value pricing. It's not the conversation with the prospect or the client. I mean, there are things there that you could learn, but what really underpins value pricing, the ability to switch from hourly billing to a value pricing model and charge for value and charge for the transformation, lies in this concept of the results mechanism. And Julie goes on to explain. See, she says, John, look, clients, they don't want your time. You can charge for your time all you want, but they don't want your time. No client ever said, I want a consultant to put in 100 hours. Like nobody. And if they do, run for the hills. Okay, it's not a client you want to be working with. They don't want your time, and they don't want your reports, and they don't want your deliverables, and they don't want your meetings. You know what they want, John? John says what? They want results. That's why they hired you. That's why they're going to hire you. They want results. They want outputs, not inputs. But to charge for those outputs and those results and that value, you've got to present them with a results mechanism that demonstrates to them exactly how results will be created, how value will be created, how the outcomes that they want for their business, for their department, for their organization, for themselves are going to be attained. And that is where premium prices come from. So here's what you got to be clear on, John. You got to be clear on a few things. One is you got to be clear on the prospect's current pain. Where are they now? Where is their struggle? Where is their pain? Where is their plight? What have they tried? What's preventing them from getting better results? What is holding them back? There's a lot there. But if you don't understand that, you're not going to win many deals. And if you're having trouble understanding that, you don't have client clarity. Go back to napkin number 1. We need to know where they stand. If we're going to be able to prescribe something that very specifically, like a tailored suit, fits them and feels right, we've got to understand their current state. And then we've got to understand where they want to be. What's the gain? What's the promised land? What's the goal? What are the outcomes? And Julie says, John, you would be shocked at how many consultants don't actually have an honest, direct conversation with their prospects and their clients about outcomes. They talk all about their process, and they talk all about their frameworks, and they talk all about their services, but they don't actually ask the client, what do you want? What's your outcome? What's your goal? What would success in working with us look like? What's your ideal scenario? Where do you want to be with regards to this problem outcome in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months? And when they do, they gloss over it. It's a superficial question they ask in the sales conversation because some sales trainer told them that they should ask that question, but they don't actually care. And they're not tailoring the conversation to those outcomes. But you got to go there, John. You got to find out what they really want. You got to find out what makes them tick. And if it seems like an overly intellectual, rational conversation, you're missing the mark, because when clients are talking about the outcomes that they want and that they care about, they get emotional. And you can feel it in their voice. And there's an energy in the conversation. And that's what you got to get to. But that's not all, because you can't simply say to them, well, Mr. Client, here's your pain, and we're going to get you to gain. And here, here's the bill for $1 million. Well, that's not going to work, John. That's where you need a results mechanism. You need a bridge that's going to take your client from where they are, pain, and get them to where they want to be, gain. And there's a few really important things that you need to do to really nail down the results mechanism, John. First of all, this is not a simple articulation of your process. So if you're thinking, well, what we do is we do discovery and we do some analysis and we make some recommendations and then we implement. Well, guess what? Every consultant says the same thing. That's not going to work. That doesn't feel like a bespoke suit. That feels like a generic consulting offer, and nobody wants generic consulting offers unless they want to be cheap and they want the cheapest option. Then that's fine. But serious buyers don't want generic solutions. They want specific solutions. So you've got to tie the specific obstacles the client faces to your mechanism. You got to be able to meet your mechanism to where the client's at and identify the specific obstacles the client is facing, preventing them from getting the results that they want from their perspective, and build a mechanism that essentially knocks down each obstacle like a domino. One obstacle after another, one domino after another, until we get to the end. But the key here, John, is to frame this from the customer's perspective, not your perspective. Because you know what they don't know. You're the expert. They're not the experts. That's why you're having the conversation. So you need to frame this in their terms, identify their obstacles, and then show them how you have a results mechanism that's going to knock down each of those obstacles one at a time and get them to the promised land. And when they see that and they believe it, John, when they fundamentally believe, when they look at your results mechanism and they go, yeah, I can totally see how that's going to work, you've won the game. Now you can have a value pricing conversation because the destination is clear and it's believable and they believe it. and they bought into your process. They bought into your mechanism. Now the question is, well, what is this worth to you? But unless you have this mechanism, there's no conversation about what it's worth. Unless you have this belief, then you're having the hourly rate conversation, because they don't really know how it's going to work. And you haven't done the hard work of showing them how it's going to work and getting them to a place of belief. So all you can do is say, well, I charge $100 an hour. How does that sound? And John says, well, that makes sense. So John senses now that it's only a matter of time before Julie finds better people to talk to. And excuses herself from the conversation. And he wants to squeeze as much value out of this as he possibly can. So he moves on to the next question.
Just a heads up on the time, Ahmed, we are nearing 2:30.
Good. Got about 10 minutes left of actual content, folks. And then we'll jump into Q&A. It's a little bit longer than I would have liked, but we're getting there. Quick check-in. How you folks feeling? We have time. Can we take 10 more minutes here to complete the delivery of this? Everybody feeling good? Are we engaged? Are we bored? If you're bored, let me know. I'll go faster. Maybe I'll try to do some voices. Maybe, maybe I'll imitate.
Please do a Julie voice. Yeah.
You know, it occurred to me, Miriam, like half an hour before we started, that we should have just had you play Julie and I play John. You know? Yeah. But I didn't want to spring the script on you at the last minute there.
No, that wouldn't have been pretty.
So kind, right? Okay. Cool. All right. So let's keep going here. Oh, the tech is not being my friend today. Okay, can you see the slides?
Yep.
So John says, look, Julie, you've struck a nerve here. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm not just a bad marketer. I'm also a bad salesperson. And it's hard for me to get conversations, but honestly, even when I get them, they don't go very well. I'm just not good at closing the deal. Just not good at sales. And Julie says, John, you don't need to be good at sales. In fact, the best salespeople don't sell at all. John says, what do you mean? And Julie says, well, instead of selling, they simply lead clients to the right decision, even if that means not working with you. And John's like, what are you talking? Julie, come on. I mean, if I get a conversation, it doesn't happen very often. Why am I going to lead clients to a decision that might mean not working with me? And Julie says, look, John, if you went to the doctor and the doctor prescribed you some medication, and then you found out that the doctor got some kickback from the pharmaceutical company that made that drug, would you trust their recommendation? John said, of course not. They're biased. They did it for the money. And Julie says, exactly. It's the same thing here. If the client believes that you're just trying to win the deal because you want the money and you want the business and you want the revenue, they're not going to believe a word that you say. And your integrity as an expert gets called into question. Sound okay, folks? I'm getting a note here. Is it just Leroy?
I can hear you.
Everybody else good?
They're good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it's starting to make sense. John can see how, in the obvious example of a doctor getting a kickback, you wouldn't trust the doctor's recommendation. Obviously, it's a violation of their code of ethics. They wouldn't do that. That's obvious. But, at the same time, you're trying to sell a consulting service and the client believes that you want the deal. Are they going to trust you? Are they going to believe what you have to say? Are they going to believe your recommendation, trust your recommendations if they know that you want the deal? And so Julie says the key, John, is to sell from the expert frame. When you sell from the expert frame, clients don't perceive that they're being sold to. They don't believe they're being sold to. They see you as the expert in the room that's making a trusted expert judgment and providing them with a recommendation that they can rely on and that they can trust because you're the expert, you're the doctor without any bias. And when you're able to sell from the expert frame, clients trust you, they believe you, they take your lead, and they will pretty much do whatever you recommend they do. But the key is to really step into that frame and sell from that frame. And John says, well, how do I do that? And Julie pulls out another napkin and she says 5 steps. I'm going to go through these quickly. Number 1 is to put the client's interests ahead of your own. And she says, John, I know this is easier said than done, but believe me when I tell you, although this feels difficult in the beginning, because I know you want the deal, in the grand scheme of things, this will be the most profitable thing you ever do. Because when you truly put the client's interests ahead of your own, when you truly put their needs ahead of your own, you don't need to fake it anymore. You don't need to pretend, which is what a lot of consultants do. They pretend like they have the client's best interest in mind. They pretend like they're so tuned into the client's needs. But pretending doesn't work because the client will perceive your need from the conversation. They'll perceive it from your state. It's not the words you say, it's how you say it. So you've got to fundamentally, honestly, authentically put the client's needs ahead of your own. If you don't do that, they're not going to see you as the expert in the room. They're not going to trust your recommendations. And the second is you've got to diagnose problems before prescribing solutions. And Julie goes on and says, look, if you walked into the doctor's office and before you could even say anything, the doctor says, here, take this medication. Would you take it, John? And John says, no, I mean, for what? That would be ridiculous. Well, then how come all these consultants walk into the client's organization and the client says, how can you help us? And the consultant jumps into a pitch. Does that fundamentally make any sense? And John says, well, no, it doesn't. And so telltale sign of an amateur or a salesperson is they jump into a pitch. All they want to do is sell their service, sell their solution. So they jump into a pitch. Telltale sign of an expert is they refuse. They refuse to make an offer for anything unless a problem is diagnosed. So Julie continues and says, John, on my team with my consultants, they are not allowed to make an offer to a client to work with us or talk about pricing or talk about terms or talk about anything until a problem is accurately diagnosed and agreed upon and understood by both parties. And we get clients who ask us all the time, well, what's it going to cost and how long is it going to take? And we say, we're not there yet. We are not going to arbitrarily prescribe you a solution without first diagnosing a problem. We call that consulting malpractice. And we know there are plenty of other consultants out there who will do that for you. And if you prefer to talk to them, be our guests. What happens when you say that to a client, John? And John says, well, they trust you. Exactly. And the third step here is to eliminate any semblance of need. Like I said earlier, says Julie, you can't fake this, John. You've got to really walk into that conversation without need. If you walk into the conversation, you walk into the meeting, you go through the sales process, and deep down, you need the deal. And you believe you need the deal. That need's going to show. And that needy energy is going to be apparent. And nothing repels clients like need. They don't want to work with the consultant that needs them. They want to work with a consultant they believe doesn't need them. And by the way, John, this getting into this state of needlessness, eliminating any semblance of need from the sales conversation. By the way, that's a direct byproduct of your marketing. Because John, if you had all three of those marketing mechanisms working, the awareness and the engagement and the conversion, and you were consistently bringing new people into your network and into your pipeline who want to work with you, who have the problem that you solve, would you go into your next sales conversation with need? And John says, no. And Julie says, why not? And John says, because if they say no, I'll go down to the next one on the list. And Julie says, exactly. And that's where you want to be, because it enables you to sell from the expert frame. Number 4. Julie says, always be willing to walk away. Clients know when you start bending to their will and you start negotiating terms and you start going above and beyond to win the deal, they know they've got you. They know they've got you exactly where they want you. And sometimes they'll try to negotiate with you just to see how much you'll dance. It's a bit of a sick game. And if you play their game, what does that tell them? They want the deal. They need the deal. Therefore, we can't trust a word they say. Because how do we know that they're telling us the truth? Or how do we know they're telling us what we want to hear so they can win the deal? That's why you've always got to be willing to walk away. If it doesn't make sense anymore, if they're pushing too hard, if the terms don't make sense, if your integrity as the expert in the room is being compromised, the most profitable thing you can do is to maintain your integrity as the expert in the room and walk out of the room. And number 5 is you got to lead clients to their own conclusion. And Julie asks John, are you familiar with the Socratic method? And John says, somewhat. And Julie said, here's the premise of the Socratic method, is that people will take more seriously the conclusions they draw for themselves than what you tell them. And the key to the sales process, John, is not telling clients what they should do, but asking the questions that lead them to their own conclusion and being open to what that conclusion might be, whether or not it means working with you. That's how you win the client's trust, John. And finally, John's last question. We're coming up on the end here, folks. At this point, poor John's overwhelmed. You know, him and Julie have been scribbling on cocktail napkins for the last 60 minutes, right? It's a lot of information. And so John says, honestly, Julie, this is a lot to process. I appreciate you being so forthright and generous, but this is a lot to process. And I mean, I'm a trained consultant at the end of the day. I'm good at what I do, but all this other stuff, I mean, it's a lot to learn. And Julie says, well, John, what attempts have you made to learn any of it in the last 5 years? And John says, well, I mean, I've been so heads down delivering on client work when I have it, that I don't have time to do any learning outside of delivering on client projects. And when I don't have client work, I'm so busy hitting the pavement for new deals. And anytime I have left for learning and development, I've been dedicated to learning new skills and acquiring new consulting capabilities I can deliver to clients. And Julie said, I get it. And that's great. But what are you doing to further your skills as a business owner, John? And John says, what do you mean? And Julie says, well, look, John, you're not just a consultant anymore. I mean, you were a consultant when we both worked at ConsultCo. That's all you had to do is they would deliver you client engagements and you would show up and you would serve the client. You were a consultant, but you're not just a consultant anymore. You're a business owner. And there's a whole lot more that you need to learn about running a business than merely the delivery of your expertise. And then Julie pulls out another trusty, the last one, cocktail napkin. And she says, let me show you a model, John. That'll make this really clear. She says, I call this the consulting trifecta. there are three pillars of a successful consulting business. All three pillars have to be in place, firing on all cylinders for a consulting practice to be healthy and profitable and sustainable. And if any one of these pillars are not in place, or if any one of the pillars is shaky, it's kind of like three legs in a stool. If you got a three-legged stool and one leg isn't there or one leg is wobbly, what happens? The moment there's some pressure, the stool collapses. The same is true for your consulting business, John. There's three legs to the stool. I call this a consulting trifecta. There is marketing, there is sales, and there is fulfillment. Marketing is the creation of opportunity, which we talked about earlier. If you don't have this, what happens when a client leaves? What happens when you lose a deal? What happens when a client that you're working with, maybe it's a whale, maybe it's not, and the project that you're working on comes to a natural completion? If you don't have a way of creating opportunity at will, you're a sitting duck. And then you have sales. Sales is the conversion of opportunity. It's how do you take that opportunity, that raw material, and turn that into revenue, turn that into cash, turn that into contracts. If you don't have this, you'll spend a lot of time and energy, maybe even money, creating opportunity. But if you can't convert that opportunity, it's going to be a pretty expensive business to run, probably not very profitable. And then finally, you have fulfillment, which is simply put, fulfilling promises that you made when you made sales. The problem is, John, that if you only see yourself as a consultant, if that is your identity, you call yourself a consultant. When you meet new people, you say, I'm a consultant. You see yourself as a consultant. That's your self-image. That's the extent of your identity as a professional, is that you're just a consultant. Then guess what? You're going to spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about consulting, thinking about fulfillment, thinking about the delivery of your service, thinking about your clients' problems, thinking about providing better service. And that's not bad. That's very good. You should be thinking about all those things, John, but not at the expense of marketing and sales, because those are also your job and your responsibility as a business owner. And Julie goes on to say it's very similar, John, to the advice that you get when you get on a plane. And the attendant says, in the event that there's a need for oxygen and the oxygen masks drop from above you, put your own mask on first. Obsessing over fulfillment at the expense of marketing and sales is like putting your client's mask on before you put your own mask on. It feels like you're doing them a service and you're putting your clients first in the immediate until you go out of business. Then all of a sudden, you're not so generous. In fact, you can't serve them at all because you didn't put your own mask on first. And that's likely, John, precisely why you're in the position that you're in right now. And just as the sting of that last statement starts to sink in, Julie gets called up to the stage, and John realizes that she's actually here to give the keynote speech at the event they're attending. And Julie says, John, it's great catching up, but I got to run. Hopefully we can talk again soon. And John's left behind with his thoughts and the 6 cocktail napkins that were left behind. That, my friends, is the story of Julie and John, or at the very least, the first installment. Maybe they'll meet again. We'll have to wait and see. So I am really keen on entertaining your questions about all of this. But before we do, I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you a little bit about how we can ultimately help you with all of this and installing the 6 distinctions of rich consultants into your business. Now, I actually don't want to spend a lot of time on this, so I'm just kind of curious, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. how many of you would you like me to spend 60 seconds at most talking about how our flagship program, the 90-day pipeline, can help you install these distinctions and ultimately grow a successful consulting business? Just give me a yay in the chat. Yeah, raise your hand or give me a yay, and I'll gauge how much time I spend on it based on how much interest there is. My intent here is not to sell, but to inform and educate. So I will only do so if there's interest in hearing. So, okay. There's, yeah, quite a few people. Okay, sounds good. So I'll spend some time. If you have questions on this, I can also entertain those in the Q&A. Okay. So look, I don't know of anything else like what we have. In fact, there's some clients in here and they're not planted. There's some former client. Errol Allen, I see you in here. Mitch Willis, I see you in here. There's a number. So, you know, you guys can correct me if you disagree with any of this stuff, because at the end of the day, your opinion matters more than mine. What we've done in the 90-day pipeline is we've built a system and a framework that delivers on all 6 distinctions. That is, get you really clear on who you're going to serve in the marketplace. Get you really clear on what the highest return on your expertise is. Client clarity. Get you really clear on your positioning. That is, how are you going to be perceived, like Julie's perceived, as the one and only option in your marketplace. I don't want you to be one of many choices. I want you to be the only choice. And that starts with your own belief and extends out to how you communicate with the marketplace. So you'll notice in my tone, I don't even need to say it. You'll notice in my tone that I fundamentally believe there is absolutely nothing else in the marketplace for B2B consultants like the 90-day pipeline. It does not exist. We are the only ones. Nobody else has packaged anything like what we deliver, and nobody else has a mechanism for delivering it like we do. It doesn't exist. We're the only ones. It's a market of one. I want the same for you. And that's a product of positioning. You can't be the one and only option for everybody with every problem, but we are absolutely the one and only option for B2B consultants who have a pipeline problem, want to generate more sales, and have deep subject matter expertise. There aren't many places for them to go, but to come to us. We want the same for you. We want you to go to your market and say, hey, look, there's 2 options for you. Either you can work with me or us, and you know, we're well positioned to do the work and you can have confidence in us to do the work, or you can roll a dice, flip a coin, work with somebody else, but that's risky. That's what we want to say to the marketplace. We're going to dial in the results mechanism. That is your process for taking a prospect from pain to gain. Dialing in the mechanism, and more importantly, is the articulation of your mechanism. Still on the iPad? Miriam? Sorry.
Still on the iPad.
I got this fancy slide. I got this fancy slide to show you guys, and I wasn't even showing it to you. That's hilarious, right? Oh man. Sorry, folks. So this is the framework of the 90-day pipeline I was showing you. We start with client clarity. Who we going after? Who's it for? Power positioning. Why should they choose you? Results mechanism. Who does it, how does it work? What's that process to take them from pain to gain? How do we articulate that mechanism in a way that feels like it's a bespoke, tailored suit, and that gives them confidence that you're going to be able to get them to the promised land? How do we package your services in a way that commands a premium value price? We're not billing for the hour. We're charging for value, and we're charging premium prices. I remember one of our former clients is a testimonial to this extent. Who was it? Kristen Mashburn? Yeah, Kristen was the one, right? Miriam, that I'm referring to. She goes, when I built out profit packaging and I had my different tiers of service, first of all the tiers were more expensive than anything I'd ever sold before. And she's like, I almost had to delete that 3rd package before I sent it to a client. Like, I didn't fundamentally believe anybody would pay for my highest package, which is, I think, like at the time she was charging 50, 60K per deal. And she goes, now that's all they're buying. They're only buying the highest package. No one's buying anything else. And it's, 10x what she was charging before, right? So there's a lot to say there around packaging. And then the marketing, how do we build out and engineer that system to generate a consistent flow of opportunity? We did a whole workshop on just this a couple of weeks ago. It's called LinkedIn Leverage, where we show you our exact step-by-step playbook for generating 10 B2B consulting opportunities per month on LinkedIn. There may be an opportunity to buy that again coming up in September, but bottom line is, in the 90-day pipeline, we not only show you the system, we help you implement every step of it, every step of the way. And then finally, expert selling. A lot of the principles we talked about in that last distinction around selling from the expert frame, it's interesting in theory, but it needs to be applied. So we spend a lot of time with our clients actually acting out real sales scenarios. Clients come on with me and they share an objection they got from a client. We did an objection handling clinic just a couple weeks ago, where actually it was kind of fun. And the client success team chose to frame this as, can you stump Ahmed with your objection? And so clients brought the worst objections, the hardest objections they've gotten before to the clinic, and they tried to stump me. And I think the jury's pretty clear, Miriam. Nobody stumped me. I answered all their objections.
You did.
Is that fair to say?
That
is that what people are saying?
say.
So look, I don't know where else you can go to dial all of this in 90 days. I just don't know. And if you find another place to do it, I actually be really keen to hear about them, because I'm looking to acquire some other businesses. So, but I don't know that that's even a thing. And we've engineered something here that's very magical. Our client results and testimonials speak to that. There's nowhere else to get something like this. There's very tactical alternatives. There's people that'll show you LinkedIn, or they'll show you sales, or they'll show you, pricing. But I don't know where else you can get all of this under one roof in one seamless experience over the course of 90 days. So that's how we can help you, folks, in a nutshell. If you're interested in pursuing that conversation more, and this is the special offer I have for you today, we're only making this offer on this call. Okay. I would invite you to schedule a consulting diagnostic call with our program advisors. And whether or not you think you want to enroll in the 90-day pipeline, I'd encourage you to book this call, because this call will give you clarity on, first of all, whether we'd be a good fit to work together, but more importantly, where your gaps are, right? Because we eat our own dog food. And what I said earlier about Julie not making offers to clients that she hasn't diagnosed the problems for, we eat our own dog food. So we're not going to make you an offer. None of this is an offer to work with you. No, in fact, the vast majority of you, we will not work with, because you don't check the boxes that we're looking for, and we can't help you. I wouldn't say the vast majority of you, but a good chunk of you, probably we can't help. Okay. So we're not going to make a blanket offer and say, well, we'd love to work with you, because that's silly. And frankly, we don't need to, right? But what we will do, in the interest of helping you and finding out if we can work together, and ultimately serving you, which is our first objective, because we're putting your needs ahead of ours, is we can get into a diagnostic conversation and find out where you're struggling, find out where you are being held back, find out where you are not getting the results that you can get. And the diagnostic is going to cover 5 areas. One is target market client clarity. Who are your highest skilled clients? What markets should you be pursuing? Where are you going to get the best bang for your buck? Positioning. How can you become the one and only consultant expert firm in your industry? How can you command that kind of authority and respect and reputation? The results mechanism. How do you structure something that can command premium prices? The marketing. Are you generating leads consistently? How could you be doing so with different tactics and methods? And finally, sales. How can you improve your conversion rate on the sales process and shorten the cycle? We'll get into a diagnostic conversation that'll help you understand where across these 5 key pillars of your business you need to be spending the most time, and where the fixes need to be made. And if we believe we can help you with any of this, and you are looking for help, that's key, right? It's not just that we believe we can help you and you're actually looking for help, then and only then will we get into a conversation about how we can help you and what that looks like. But for a lot of you, we may not get there, and we're happy to offer you this diagnostic, and we're happy to get you clarity on what you need to be working on. And we're very confident that whether you work with us now or later, that when you are in a position to work with us, you will come back and you will work with us, because again, there's not many other places to go to get help with this. So here's the special offer. We are so confident that having this consulting diagnostic call. Great question, Sharon. Is the diagnostic part covered anyway if we sign up for the full program? Absolutely. Yeah. The diagnostic is the first thing that we do. We're just making this a little bit easier for you to engage with. So you don't need to wait to work with us to get the diagnostic. You can get it right now. Okay. So we're so confident that this conversation is about a 45-minute conversation is going to be worth your time and probably the most profitable and valuable 45 minutes you spent on your business in a very long time, that we want to make this an absolute no-brainer for you. And that's just for the people on this call. We are not making the following offer to anybody else. That's only for you folks who are here live. Replay folks don't get this, right? Team replay, hashtag replay, not getting this. This is just for you folks who are here live. There's about 90 of you. And I don't even know that I can do this for all of you, but we'll honor the offer because we're making it. So if you schedule a consulting diagnostic call by 4 p.m. Eastern, what time is it now, Miriam? It's 3 p.m. So you've got 1 hour to schedule a consulting diagnostic call. If you do that, and Miriam will drop a link into the chat here for you to do so, just to really make this a no-brainer for you. Right? If you're like, oh, I don't know, should I do it? Should I not do it? We're so confident this is the right thing for you to do, not because you want to work with us, but because it's going to be valuable to you, this diagnostic, right? And maybe you choose to work with us, maybe you don't. That's a secondary thing. If you book it before 4 p.m. Eastern, we're going to send you 5 bonus trainings, no strings attached. All you got to do is book the call, show up to the call, have the conversation, and we're going to send you 5 bonus trainings. Okay. And these trainings, by the way, are going to operationalize everything that we talked about here today, right? So in fact, LinkedIn leverage, are we going to send them the paid version, Miriam?
I believe so, yeah. Unless,
oh man, that's a hell of an offer. So that paid training that I talked about might happen again in a couple of weeks. It's basically yours for free if you book this call and show up to the call and engage. But you got to book it before 4 p.m. Eastern today. So you have an hour. So LinkedIn leverage, that's a 4-day in-depth training on our entire LinkedIn marketing system end to end. Solopreneur CEO is a training where I chronicle exactly how I took my business from about 10K a month to 300K a month in 30 months. It's a pretty wild story. And we break it down step by step by step. Okay. The results mechanism is a practical tutorial on how to build out the results mechanism that commands premium value prices. $1,000 an hour, same thing, right? How do we command? I'm not going to teach you how to charge $1,000 an hour, but I'm going to teach you how to think about your services and the delivery of your expertise in such a way that you can command effective hourly rates of $1,000 an hour. If you do the math on what I earn for an hour of my time, last time I checked, it was about $1,500 an hour. If you want to know how I charge $1,500 an hour, you're going to want that training. And then the last one that we're going to send you here is Irresistible Offers, right? How do we apply a results mechanism to the client situation and apply it to their specific context in a way that they feel foolish saying no? Right? That's how you'll know that you've got an irresistible offer, as you make it. And they're like, we would be dumb, basically, like we'd be stupid not to say yes to this. Okay. So we're going to get you those 5 bonus trainings. All you got to do, if you want to, you don't have to do it, right? But if you want to, you can book this consulting diagnostic. We'll have the conversation. We'll get you clarity on where you're at, where you could be getting better results. And if you want to work with us, we'll have that conversation too, but no pressure to do so. Some folks are saying, I only see testimonials. Is there any issues with that page, Miriam?
No, so the thing is a little slow. Give it a few seconds, refresh the page, and you should see something like, can I take over the screen share for 1 sec?
Yeah, it probably doesn't help that there's a rush of people going to that page right now. So I can imagine that
I'm already seeing call bookings. And I also wanted to note, some people are saying that they're having a hard time finding a time that works for their time zone. Feel free to email me within the hour and I will find one. We'll still honor the training. So this is kind of what it looks like. You want to just give it a minute, because if I refresh.
Yeah, that's a good call, because I don't even think there's many time slots available in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
So why don't we drop, Miriam, we'll drop your email in the chat. Bode, if you're technically ready to go, as in you're ready to enroll. Bode's asking, is there any point in booking if I'm technically ready to go? Are you ready to enroll and working with us? Is that what you're saying? No, then go ahead and engage the program advisor you spoke to before, and they'll let you go, and they'll get you going, and we'll give you the trainings. I mean, that's fine. Don't worry about that. Cool. Yeah, I know there's some people on the call who are like, I know there's some people on the call who have already had a conversation with our team and they want to enroll. Yeah, then you don't need to do this. Just go back and engage your program advisor and they'll get you going. Cool. And Miriam dropped a link there to her email. If you can't find a slot that works for you, but you want to get this offer, just email her before 4 p.m. Eastern and we'll honor the offer. Mm-hmm. Roland's saying, I haven't even started my consulting business. Will this be offered again? So we actually have an offer. I didn't talk about it today. We have an offer that'll help you start your business, Roland. So if you're on this call and you don't have a consulting business, but you want our help to launch one in the next 60 days, that is build out an offer and get your first paying client in the next 60 days. Give me a yes in the chat. Do you want our help to launch a brand new consulting offer and get your first paying client in the next 60 days? Would that be interesting to you? Okay, that's a different offer. It's called Consulting Launchpad, and it does exactly what I just told you. 60 days to build out your offer, validate it, and get your first paying client. So what we can do is drop a yes if that's you. If you're interested in that, we'll have somebody reach out to you about that and see if it's a good fit for you. But yeah, I didn't speak to that earlier. That's another offer. If you're not quite there yet, we're happy to have that conversation. Roger's asking, do you help insurance professionals? Yeah, B2B, sure, not B2C. Justin saying, can we flip calendar September? Only a few dates left in August. Yeah, if you want to book in September, Justin, go ahead and email Miriam and she can help you out with that. Just send that email by 4 p.m. Cool. Vic saying, I booked the call and I did not get the bonus. So the bonus we're going to send you manually, Vic. It's not like you don't book the call and then you get the bonus. We're going to send it over to you manually. So you book the call, fill out, we should mention there's an application form, right? So you've booked the call, there's an application form after the call, fill that out. That's how we're going to assess whether or not you're a good fit for the conversation, because we can't do it with everybody, unfortunately, right? If you're qualified for the conversation, you'll find out that you're qualified. You'll have the call and then our team will send you the training after the fact. If we disqualify you, we'll send you the trainings. That's fine. We don't want to penalize you for not being a good fit to work with us. But if we disqualify you, we'll still send you the trainings. Cool. Okay. All right. I want to really get to other questions about the training. So is there anything else about this particular offer, the diagnostic, that I can quickly address, or about our program before we get into questions about the training?
A few folks are asking if they've previously spoken to a consultant, if they've had a diagnostic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it might be worth re-engaging, Daryl. Depends on how long ago you had the conversation.
Someone is asking, Sahran, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but what makes someone a good fit for your program?
You're selling B2B, okay, not B2C. You're selling a consulting or professional service and you have subject matter expertise. Okay, those are the main things. B2B, consulting or professional service, and deep subject matter expertise. If you check those boxes, it's going to be a fit. Okay. Yeah, Jennifer and Daryl, I mean, if you're unsure, go ahead and book it again. There's no harm in having the conversation again, see where you're at now. Things might have changed and we'll see what makes sense. Cool. Any other questions about this or about 90-day pipeline? Cool. Tarek saying he's ready to go with the program. Fantastic. We'll talk about that, Tarek. All right, let's get into questions about the training, folks. Let's get into questions about the training. I see we got a lot in the Q&A box. Should I just go ahead and hit these one at a time?
Yes, I've got a few more that came in earlier that I just want to flag for you because I promised some folks that I would. I want to be chronological about this. Yeah. So few folks were asking about how do you describe the bespoke solution without knowing what their specific problem is. I think this was in one of the earlier slides you were showing.
Yeah, so that's why you got to make a decision, folks, right? So this is where, Julie decided that she was going to solve the problem of poor customer retention and client retention for B2B SaaS companies. She made that decision. She didn't wait for a client to tell her that she has that problem, although she likely did have a number of clients tell her that. But once she saw a pattern and she saw that, okay, well, a lot of B2B SaaS companies, they're good at marketing. and they're good at sales. And this is, actually based on a real client. This is a true story, but I named her Julie, right? A lot of B2B SaaS companies and the founders of them are overly concerned with marketing and sales. They get investment money. They spend that money on building a sales team. They spend that money on outbound sales techniques. They spend that money on advertising, and they're consumed by customer acquisition. And they're very, very bad at retaining customers and enhancing lifetime value. So she saw that pattern with the clients she was working with, and she chose to specialize in solving that problem. So the clients who don't have that problem, so she's very clear, I help B2B SaaS companies increase their lifetime value through stronger retention, right? And likely she's more specific and meaningful than that. The clients who don't have that problem, don't pay attention to her. That's fine. That's what she wants. You don't want to be relevant to everybody, right? The goal here is to go from being a wandering generality to a meaningful specific. Most management consultants are wandering generalities. You ask them what they do at a networking event and they say, I'm a consultant. What? What? Who cares, right? Wandering generality. Julie is a meaningful specific. What do? I help B2B SaaS companies improve client retention and increase lifetime value. Specific. And what happens is the clients who have that problem, and she knows from her experience, there's a lot of them, immediately see the resonance of her proposition, and they're the ones who engage her. And the ones who don't have that problem don't go anywhere near her, which is precisely what she wants. Does that make sense? Cool.
We've got a bunch in the Q&A.
Okay, so Devin asking, you mentioned case studies as part of your confidence builder. How long is a typical case study? 1 page with bullet items or multiple pages with problem, approach, solution, written out more detail? Yeah, totally depends, Devin. So I'm not going to really give you a very tactical answer here. It's going to depend on the context and what you need to communicate. The important thing with a case study is that the client sees themselves in the story. Okay, that's the key. The client sees themselves in the story. If they don't see themselves in your client situation, they're frankly not going to engage you or pay attention. So, if you look at our client testimonials, in every one, what we ask our clients is we ask them to tell us what was happening in their business before they engaged us. And you might say, well, what does that matter? I mean, at the end of the day, talk about the results, and they talk about the results, but we tell them to talk about what was happening in their business before they engaged us, because we know for folks like you who are thinking about engaging us, that's the most relevant part. Is if you can see yourself in their description of where they were and what they were struggling with before they engaged us, it immediately gives you confidence that you're in the right place. You go, oh, these people are like me. So that might not have been the tactical answer you're looking for, Devin, but that's the key to a case study, is helping the client that you want to work with see themselves in the story. That's what makes it work. Sharon's asking, this sounds great, but there are services that are truly similar across different companies. In that case, does it mean that we have to completely change the business that we're in and offering to our clients? I don't really understand what you're asking, Sharon. There might have been some context there. If you could explain that out in more detail in the chat, happy to address it. Loney's asking, I really appreciate the conversation around bespoke consulting versus a one-size-fits-all approach. How do you keep the costs of bespoke consulting financially viable, because it takes so much more time than offering a standard package? Really good question, Loney. So you're absolutely right? Like bespoke offers are, all things considered, more expensive to deliver on, but also more expensive for the client, right? So you can get away with a higher cost base if you can get away with charging a premium price. And as long as, the increase in price and going from a standard package to a bespoke package is higher than the increase in cost, you're fine, right? You're still going to make more money. Now, that said, I don't recommend that you are truly bespoke in every way. Like, that is, you will do anything for anyone. Like that's one extreme. That's one bespoke extreme. It's like, oh, we'll do anything for anybody. No, I'm suggesting that you be bespoke within a very narrowly defined problem set. So let's go back to Julie. Julie is bespoke within solving client experience and retention problems for B2B SaaS companies. Okay. We, 90-day pipeline, are bespoke within helping B2B consultants grow their pipeline. Right. So when you have really well-defined parameters for the scope of your services, you can afford to be bespoke within the details without it getting away from you, because there's very clearly defined parameters and walls. But if you're going to be bespoke with no parameters, yeah, that's going to be a disaster. Does that make sense, Loney? Let me know in the chat if that's adding up for you. For us, as I'm too early into this consulting business, do you think it's even early for me to get to diagnostics? Because, I think we answered that. Peter, how do you build awareness in the AEC process? What have you seen work particularly well? The LinkedIn leverage training is going to give you a more detailed answer on that, Peter. We are very, very active and bullish, and we double down on LinkedIn for awareness, right? So LinkedIn is the primary mechanism through which we teach building out a list of prospects and targets, engaging that list, and ultimately getting thought leadership and insights in front of that list that build their trust in you. There are other things that you could be doing outside of LinkedIn, depending on the complexity of your organization. If you're, earlier stage, you want to really double down on one platform. Once you master that, there are things you could be doing after that, but that's more of a kind of a phase 2 type conversation. So LinkedIn is really the name of the game when it comes to awareness, combined with, I should say, referrals and partnerships. So most of our clients are going to do 2 things when they come in. They're going to go ahead and they're going to leverage LinkedIn as a direct to client engagement strategy. They're also going to go ahead and actively build out their partnership network, because the clients that you want, I guarantee you, the clients that you want already have relationships with other advisors, professionals, consultants, and organizations that they trust. And if you can engage those other relationships and get them to bring you in, but do so not as a happy accident, but as a deliberate strategy, you're going to win the day. So most of our clients are going to pursue both of those channels as an awareness mechanism. Adrian says, can you give some examples of results mechanisms, perhaps from your clients? So ours is one. 90-day pipeline is a results mechanism. Okay. Let me think. Off the top of my head, Dr. Arlen Ward has a computer simulation mechanism for medical device companies that allows them to speed up their product development timeline at a fraction of the cost. That's a mechanism. Robert Cross has a strategic planning mechanism for renewable energy companies that help them prioritize resources and labor and capital to get the highest scale in the shortest amount of time. Erica Lee Garcia has a mechanism for manufacturing companies that allow them to minimize the waste in their labor process and ultimately get higher outputs. I don't remember all the names of these mechanisms. Todd Holtzman has a mechanism that he delivers to Fortune 500 CEOs and their C-suites called the Rework Method. It's a fundamentally different approach to leadership development that's based on solving real, live world business problems in the context of leadership training and development. Miriam, any other mechanisms come to mind? I'm going off the top of my head here.
You took all our best ones, so now I'm stuck.
Well, I don't know about that. There's lots of good ones. But and there's a whole lot more we could say about mechanisms, and the training on that will get you further. But the key with a mechanism is it's got to be something that they haven't heard before. So what underpins a good mechanism is a point of view. And we didn't get into a lot of that today because it was already pretty long, right? So the key to a good mechanism is that there's a point of view. So I'll give you my point of view, right? Our point of view in a nutshell is positioning over prospecting. So notice that we didn't talk a lot about prospecting today. We talk about it in LinkedIn leverage, but even in that training, it's more about positioning, because our point of view that we believe in wholeheartedly is that when you nail positioning, prospecting becomes easy. And that's a point of view that you have to buy before you buy our mechanism. Our mechanism is 90-day pipeline, but you got to buy the point of view before you buy the mechanism. So that's something to think about. Is the mechanism is important, but even before the mechanism, your point of view is important, because they buy your point of view before they buy the mechanism. Car's asking, how can I show case studies if I don't have one? Is it ethical to make up a couple of clients? No, that's not ethical. So when we look at the confidence builder, if you recall that slide, the confidence builder, I'll just share it again. case studies are not the only cue, right? Case studies, i.e. the track record. Ryan Hawley is in here saying his mechanism is pretty awesome. And Miriam, you didn't mention his.
I'm sorry, Ryan. It wasn't intentional.
Come on now. Hey, Ryan, drop your mechanism in the chat. Might be helpful to people if you don't mind. Good to see you here. So sorry, Prakar. Case studies and track record, that's one of 3 pillars of the confidence builder. That's one of 3 cues, right? The way you get around not having case studies. I mean, first of all, there may be creative ways for you to get case studies. For example, one of our clients came to me with a very similar question the other day. And I asked, have you had experiences via former employment engagements where you were an employee at a company? Have you done things there that would demonstrate your ability to deliver on the problems that your clients have, that the market has? And the answer to that is almost always yes, because otherwise, where is your claim to expertise? If you've never done it before, you don't have expertise. So chances are you've done what you're trying to do in some other context, maybe not a consulting context, maybe an employment context. Can you generalize that story and tell it in a way that's relevant to your market? Probably. Might not mention the company name, but you can still tell the story of what happened and what you did and be completely within the ethical boundaries. Okay. That said, if you're struggling with case studies, these 2 are going to get you your first deals. It is very thorough problem education and a demonstrated understanding to your client that you get what they're going through, and a very tailored, specific solution prescription. Okay, that's enough to win you the deal. It gets easier when the track record speaks for itself, but it's not necessary. Loney says, I also love the ideas around creating demand and creating a bottleneck for services. We are in education and want as many kids as possible to access our services. How do we make our company rich, not just in the financial way, but also in the freedom and autonomy way, and also reconcile the ethical elements of helping kids? That's a really good question, Loney. I don't know that I have, we need to talk about that. But it's a good question. Yeah. It's a thinker. We need to have a conversation to explore that more fully. I don't know if you're looking to work with us. If so, I'd be happy to have that conversation. If not, maybe we find some other way to do it. But it's a good question. And I don't know that I have a great answer off the top of my head. We need to explore that more fully. But it sounds like you're doing some great work. So good for you. That's great to hear. Yeah, Ryan dropped his mechanism there. He said, I started the program about a month ago and developed a reproducible sales strategy for small to medium-sized businesses called the Raven system. That's a mechanism, the Raven system. Sounds pretty cool, Ryan. Justin saying, my expertise is in helping small record labels grow. A lot of these have a labor of love operations, i.e. small incomes. I also have to care enough about the people and the label to agree to work with them. Need to find a new niche, despite the typical scenario where they maybe can't afford me or keep this approach. Yeah. I mean, all things considered, I would hesitate to build your business around a market that can't afford to pay your services. So a lot of times what I've seen work in situations like this is the consultant will go after a market that clearly can afford to pay their services, right? And they'll build their base around that market, and then they will reinvest that into markets that maybe can't afford to pay their services. So you could build your base in a market where there is, really strong demand and there are resources, so that you pay yourself and you're compensated for the work that you do in your expertise. And then you can start to get into markets if you want to that maybe can't afford it as much, or you can charge a lower price, but now you're not betting your livelihood on it. You're doing it because you care and because you want to. And that's something to think about, Justin. Cool. Do you have Adrian's question, Miriam? She's asking.
Yes, that was the first one that we answered.
Oh, cool. Cool. All right. I think that's all we got, right?
Just going through the chat. I can see something in the Q&A.
Cool. David, I see your question. I'm going to hit that right now. Real quick, folks, as we wrap up here, I would love for you, this is something we ask our clients to do on calls, and I think that's a great thing to do. I would love for you to drop your number one takeaway from today's presentation in the chat. It's going to be helpful to me because I'm going to get your feedback on what you're taking away. It's also going to be helpful to you because articulating your number one takeaway in the chat here is going to help you lock in the learning. It's also going to be helpful to your peers because they're going to see perspectives from you that maybe they didn't appreciate. So take a minute here. What's your number one takeaway from today's conversation? Drop that in the chat and I will answer a couple more questions here while you're doing that. David's asking, can you run through timing again for the confidence builder? That's for client clarity. Yeah, sure. So let's run through some examples of timing. Timing is ultimately about speed of conversion. Okay. So when the right client comes to you with the right problem at the right time, the deal closes fast. So a lot of people say, well, I have long sales cycles. How do I reduce my sales cycle? How do I make it shorter? And there are things you can do, but actually the most powerful thing that you can do to reduce your sales cycle is clearly articulate to your market in your marketing when they should engage you, what the circumstances ought to look like for them to know they're in a position to work with you. Because then they come to you when they are good and ready and they know the timing to be right. And those conversations happen very quickly and the deal is closed very quickly. So what we call this, we train our clients inside the program to think about what is the perfect storm of circumstances. Okay. What is the perfect storm of circumstances in your client's organization that make them perfect to work with you? Okay. That make them ripe to work with you. What do those circumstances look like? So for Julie, it was they crossed $5 million in annual recurring revenue, and likely there's a CX leader that's been appointed now to improve client retention. And because they've been so focused on marketing and sales and acquisition, they have very little rigor in their CX department around maximizing lifetime value. They don't know what levers to pull. They don't have a framework or strategy through which to look at it, and Julie solves for that. But there's a time for that. It doesn't make sense for her to do it when they're at $2 million or $3 million. And she's made that assessment, right? It may also not make sense for her to do it if they don't have a CX leader yet. They haven't hired a CX leader yet. Then nobody owns this problem. Doesn't make sense for them to do it yet. So for Julie, it's their $5 million ARR and they have a CX leader. And they're now getting very serious strategically from the top down about retention and lifetime value because investors are asking. That's an example of the perfect storm of circumstances. Does that help? I forget who asked the question. David, what it was, right? David, does that help? Awesome. Cool. Yeah, quick note on Lonnie's takeaway here. Lonnie says, while we are not currently in a position where we need clients, I really love the insight and knowledge that we can start to invest in and think about how when we are on the top versus when we are in an urgent situation. Since we are originally teachers, our transition to consultants and now business owners is an important one. And I really love the additional knowledge about how to make that transition. So, here's the thing, Lonnie, and I'm really glad you made that point. And everyone on this call who's in that position should think about this. The best time to go out and pursue new clients is when you don't need new clients. And the second best time is when you need new clients. And I'll tell you why, okay? If any of you are familiar with the theory of constraints or the theory of bottlenecks, great book by Dr. Eli Goldratt called The Goal, where he articulates the theory of constraints. It's a long book too, but point is that every system has constraints. Every system has bottlenecks. Okay. And in a consulting client service business, and I know this is a somewhat of an ethical consideration for you, Lonnie, and that's the part that we need to explore more deeply. But if we ignore that for a moment, if our goal is to maximize revenue and fees and minimize effort, right? Which again, Lonnie, not entirely true for you, but if that were the case, right? Then we want to place the bottleneck on our ability to serve clients. That is, we want a capacity problem. So when people go through 90-day pipeline, they come out at the end and they go, I went from having an opportunity problem, a lead generation problem, to now I have a capacity problem. What do I do? And it's a bit of a panic moment for people because it's very, I remember I was there. It's very uncomfortable as a consultant and a service provider to say, I can't take on new clients anymore. That's a very uncomfortable place to be. But actually, as a done for you consultant and service provider, it's exactly where you want to be. Because if you have a capacity constraint and you go out and you keep marketing and you build a pipeline like Julie did and a wait list of clients who want to work with you that you cannot work with yet, what happens? One, you have all the power in that relationship now. You don't have to say yes to a deal. You can walk away from client engagements that are not serving you anymore. You can raise your fees. And most importantly, clients need you more than you need them. You have the power. You have the control. They don't. You call the shots. So I'm glad you brought that up, Lonnie, because we get that a lot from people. They go, well, I'd love to work with you guys. It sounds amazing, but I don't need any clients right now. And we say, exactly. Now's the time. When you don't need them, now's the time to build that pipeline, build that wait list so we can double your fees. We can exit certain client relationships that are not serving you, and we can put you in a position of power, right? Now, if you're not in that position and you need the clients now, then you definitely need to work with us. But my point is, even if you don't think you need it now, you probably do need it now. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. So I think that's a wrap, Miriam. Do you want to one more time just drop the link to the booking page in case folks want to avail themselves of those bonuses? Last reminder for you, have until 4 p.m. Eastern to get the 5 bonus trainings. All you got to do is go to the page, that link that Miriam's linking here in the comments, and book your consulting diagnostic. We'd be really excited to speak to you. The team thrives in talking to smart consultants, right? It's why it's why they stayed with us, right? We got a couple of program advisors that have been with us for a couple of years now, and they go, the best thing about working with you guys is we get to talk to some of the smartest people in the world. And I concur. And that's what makes our work very interesting, is we get to work with some very smart, interesting people. So we'd love to talk to you. If you choose to work with us, we'd love to work with you, and we're looking forward to it. I hope you all got something out of this conversation. You took something away that you can apply and that you can use. And I'm sure we'll be doing more things like this in the future. This is a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. So with that, we're going to sign off here and wish you a good rest of the day and a good rest of the week. Y'all take care.
Thank you, everybody. This is great.